Redemption is a long road, but even the darkest path is lit by the flickering neon of hope and second chances. Witness the powerful stories of rebirth and the incredible strength it takes to start over from absolutely nothing. Hit subscribe now and let the light guide you home.
Follow my story until the end and please comment the city you're watching from. I read every single one. The smell of cinnamon was the first thing I noticed that Tuesday morning. I'd been baking apple bread since 6, the way my late husband Walter used to like it, even though he'd been gone 4 years now. Habits don't die just because the people who started them do. I was 63 years old, living alone in the same colonial house in Concord, Massachusetts that Walter and I had bought back in 1987 when our son James was still in diapers. I poured my second cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the maple tree in the backyard. The leaves were starting to turn. October in New England has a way of making you feel both peaceful and a little melancholy at the same time. I had nothing to complain about, really. Walter had left me comfortable. Between his life insurance, the pension from his 32 years at Raytheon, and the savings we'd built together, I had just over $112,000 in my main account, plus the house paid off in 2019, plus a small inheritance from my mother that I'd kept in a separate account for emergencies, $41,000, untouched. I was a retired registered nurse. I'd worked 12-hour shifts at Mount Auburn Hospital for almost 4 decades. I knew the value of $1. I knew the value of saying no to a second cookie, a new coat, a vacation we couldn't afford. Walter and I had raised James to know it too. Or so I thought. That morning my phone rang at 7:45. It was James. "Mom," he said, and I could hear the panic he was performing. James has always been a bit of a performer. "Mom, I need a favor. A big one." "What's wrong, honey?" "Lauren's car broke down on Route 2. She's stuck. I'm in a meeting in Boston. I can't get to her. The tow company wants $450 up front. And my card got flagged for some fraud thing yesterday and they're sending a new one. Can you call them and put it on yours? I'll pay you back tonight, I swear." Lauren. My daughter-in-law. They'd been married 3 years by then. The wedding had been a beautiful affair at a vineyard in the Berkshires, $68,000, of which Walter and I had paid $42,000. Lauren's parents had pleaded financial hardship at the last minute. We hadn't argued. You don't ruin your only son's wedding over money. "Of course," I told James. "Give me the number." I called the tow truck driver. Nice man, name of Eddie. I gave him my Visa over the phone, listened to him thank me, and hung up. $453.22. That night, James didn't pay me back. He didn't pay me back the next night either. When I finally brought it up the following Sunday at dinner, he laughed and slapped his forehead and said, "Oh shoot, Mom, I totally forgot. I'll Venmo you right now." And he did. Right there at the table. $350. "Honey," I said. "It was $450. Was it? You sure?" Eddie quoted us $350. I pulled up the credit card statement on my phone. Showed him the charge. He squinted at it like it was written in Greek, then shrugged and sent another $103 and change. "Sorry, Mom. My bad." Looking back, that was the first crack. The first tiny little fissure in the dam. If I'd paid attention, I would have seen what was coming. But I was a mother, and mothers don't want to see those things. About a month later, Lauren called me directly. She was crying. Her grandmother in Phoenix had taken a fall. She needed to fly out. The last-minute ticket was $1,100. James was tapped out from some property tax thing they hadn't budgeted for. "Could I please? Just this once, please." I didn't even hesitate. I gave her my credit card number over the phone. I told her not to worry about paying me back right away. Family is family. She paid me back 6 weeks later. $600. I never said a word about the missing $5. By the spring of the following year, I had given them my credit card information for, I'm embarrassed to say, 11 separate emergencies. Andrew's, James's, transmission. Lauren's dental crown. A vet bill for their golden retriever, Biscuit. A leak in their roof. A broken refrigerator. Plane tickets when Lauren's father had a heart scare. Each one urgent. Each one tearful. Each time, James or Lauren swore they'd pay me back as soon as the next paycheck cleared. Some they did. Most they didn't. Or they paid back partial amounts, rounded down with a sheepish, "Sorry, money's tight." Then in June, James called and asked if they could just keep my card information on file with their Amazon account. "It would just save us all this back and forth, Mom, and it's only for emergencies." "We'd never abuse it. You can see every charge. You can cancel at any time." I should have said no. I knew, even as I said yes, that I should have said no. But James was my only child. I had raised him alone for the last 4 years, helped him through his father's death, paid for half his master's degree at Northeastern. I wanted him to know I was there. I wanted to be a good mother. So I said yes. That was June. By the following March, I was sitting at the same kitchen table looking at a printed bank statement, and my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the coffee cup. It started because I went to buy a new washing machine. The old one had finally given up after 26 years of service. I'd been putting it off, frankly, because money felt tighter than usual, and I couldn't quite figure out why. My pension hit the same. My Social Security hit the same. I wasn't spending differently. But the cushion was thinner. Smaller. Some months I was almost overdrawn, which had never ever happened to me in 40 years of managing my own money. I drove to the appliance store, picked out a sensible Maytag for $9.49, and when I tried to pay, the card was declined. I was mortified. The young woman behind the counter was kind about it, told me sometimes the chip readers were finicky, suggested I try again, declined a second time. I paid with my debit card instead and drove home with my face hot and my chest tight. I sat down at my computer that night, logged into my credit card account for the first time in months, and I started scrolling. I'm going to tell you what I saw, and I want you to understand that I had to read it 3 times before my brain would accept it. There were charges from the previous 9 months that I did not recognize. Not 1 or 2, hundreds. A $900 dinner at Capitol Grill. A $2,000 stay at a resort in Newport, Lululemon, Sephora, Apple, Best Buy. A charge from a place called Aria Wellness Retreat for $1,800. 4 separate charges totaling $1,900 at a salon in Wellesley. I added it up. I added it again because I didn't believe the first number. $63,472. Over 9 months. From people who were both employed. James is a software engineer at a firm in Cambridge making, by his own bragging, around $140,000 a year. Lauren, who worked in marketing at a biotech company in Kendall Square, made about 90. They had no kids. They had no medical bills. They had a mortgage on a house in Lexington that, as far as I knew, was well within their means. $63,000. I sat in my kitchen until 2 in the morning. I didn't cry. That came later. What I did, sitting there in my robe with the printed statement spread across the table, was something colder. I started writing things down. I made a list, every charge, every date, every merchant. I went back further, 18 months further, and I added those up too. The total was $87,341. That's when I cried. I'd worked 38 years as a nurse. 12-hour shifts. Holidays, nights. Walter and I had skipped vacations, driven the same Honda for 15 years, packed lunches every single day, all so we could leave something for ourselves in old age, and something for our boy when we were gone. Walter had died of pancreatic cancer at 61, without ever taking the trip to Ireland he'd dreamed of his whole life. We were going to go the year after he retired. He retired on a Friday and was diagnosed the following Wednesday, and our son and his wife had taken $87,000 of that money and spent it on resort weekends and salon visits and dinners at restaurants I had never even heard of. I want to be honest with you. The first thing I felt after the crying stopped was shame. My own shame that I had been so blind, so willing, so foolish. I'm a smart woman. I balanced a checkbook every Sunday of my adult life. How had I let this happen? The second thing I felt was rage. The kind of cold, quiet rage that doesn't shout. The kind that makes plans. I did not call James the next morning. I did not confront Lauren. I had been a nurse long enough to know that when something is seriously wrong, you don't react, you assess. You gather information, you stabilize before you operate. The first thing I did that very next morning at 9 a.m., when the bank opened, was drive to my branch in Concord and sit down with a young man named Marcus. I told him everything. He listened, took notes, and then he did 3 things for me. He froze the credit card. He issued me a brand new card with a brand new number that would arrive in 4 to 6 business days. And he opened a brand new checking account at a different bank entirely, transferred my balance, and closed the old one. Anything that James or Lauren had access to, anything they might have a routing number for, anything connected to autopay, gone. The second thing I did was drive to my attorney's office. Her name is Diane Choi. She'd written my will after Walter died. She's a tough woman, late 50s, the kind of lawyer who doesn't waste your time or her own. I showed her the spreadsheet I printed. She looked at it for about 2 minutes and looked up at me and said, "This is financial elder abuse. You have a case, a strong one. Do you want to file a police report?" I sat in her office chair for a long moment. Outside her window, the church bells were ringing 11. "I want my money back," I said. "All of it. I want them to understand what they did. And I do not want to ever wonder for the rest of my life whether I could have done more to make this right." She nodded. "Then yes. We file a report. We send a demand letter. And if they don't pay back what they took, we sue. Civil suit, separate from any criminal charges which the police will handle on their own. Will James go to jail?" She paused. "It depends on the prosecutor and on what your son and his wife decide to do. But the simple answer is, it's possible, especially given the amount and the duration." I thought about that. I thought about it for a long time. The boy I had nursed through chickenpox at age 5. The young man I had watched graduate from Northeastern. The grown adult who had sat at my kitchen table and laughed and patted my hand and told me he loved me, all while planning with his wife to drain me dry. "File it," I said. The third thing I did was change every single password on every single account I had. Email, banking, Amazon, the Wi-Fi router, the smart lock on my front door. I called the locksmith and had the physical locks replaced too. I told no one. Not James, not Lauren, not even my best friend Helen down the street. I waited. It took 8 days. 8 days for Lauren to try to put through a charge for what I would later learn was a $400 order from a children's clothing store called Janie and Jack. They were planning to start a family, apparently. Buying clothes for a baby that didn't yet exist on my credit card. The card declined. She tried again. Declined. My phone rang at 1:15 on a Wednesday afternoon. "Mom," Lauren's voice. Lauren had never, not once in 3 years of marriage, called me Mom. She called me Linda. The fact that she was calling me Mom now told me everything I needed to know. "Hello, Lauren." "Mom, the weirdest thing just happened. Your card got declined at Janie and Jack. I was buying some little things, just being hopeful. James and I have been trying. And it said the card was canceled. Did the bank do something? Did somebody get your information?" I let her talk. I let her dig the hole as deep as she wanted to. When she finally ran out of words, I said very quietly, "Lauren, there's no fraud on the card. I canceled it. On purpose. Because I saw what you and James have been doing for the last 1.5 years. There was a silence so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said in a voice that had gone hard as a rock, "Linda, you don't know what you're talking about. James told me you've been getting confused lately." I almost laughed. I'd worked night shifts in a cardiac ward into my late 50s without missing a single medication. The nerve of this woman. "I am not confused," I said. "I have $87,341 worth of unauthorized charges in a spreadsheet on my desk. I have an attorney, and I have, as of this morning, filed a police report with the Concord Police Department, which has been forwarded to the Financial Crimes Unit." The line went dead. 22 minutes later, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Tires squealing. I was standing in the kitchen, washing my coffee cup, completely calm. I had been waiting for this. The front door slammed open. James came striding through my house like he owned it. "Mom, what the hell did you do? What did you say to Lauren? She's hysterical. She's having a panic attack. What is wrong with you?" I dried my hands on a dish towel and turned to face him. My only child. 36 years old. The boy whose forehead I had kissed every night for 18 years. James, I said, sit down. I will not sit down. You owe my wife an apology. You owe both of us an apology. We have been there for you ever since Dad died, and this is how you treat us? You accuse us of stealing? You're losing it, Mom. I'm calling Dr. Pereira. I think you need an evaluation. It is a strange thing the moment your child threatens to have you committed in order to cover his own crimes. I have never in my life felt anything like it. It is the loneliest feeling there is. James, I said again, sit down. Something in my voice must have reached him because he sat at the kitchen table, at the same table where I had read him Goodnight Moon 1,000 times. I picked up the spreadsheet I had prepared, 43 pages, single-spaced. I set it in front of him. Every charge, I said, you and Lauren have made on my credit card going back 21 months. Every date, every amount, every merchant, total at the bottom. $87,341.16. He stared at it. He did not pick it up. Mom, this isn't, some of these are emergencies you knew about. The roof, the car. We talked about all this. James, look at me. Did you and I talk about a $2,000 weekend in Newport? Did you and I discuss $1,800 at a wellness spa? Was it an emergency when Lauren spent $2,300 at Bloomingdale's in a single afternoon last August? His face had gone white. Mom, look, I can explain. Lauren she's been under a lot of pressure with the fertility stuff. The hormones they make her spend, it's a coping thing. I've been trying to manage it. I was going to talk to you, I swear. We were going to set up a payment plan. We were going to make this right. When? What? When were you going to talk to me? When were you going to make it right? It's been almost 2 years. When? He had no answer. He just sat there. My attorney, I said, is named Diane Choi. She has all the documentation. Tomorrow morning you and Lauren will receive a certified letter at your home in Lexington. The letter will demand the full repayment of the funds within 90 days. If repayment is not made, we will file a civil suit. Separately, the Concord Police Department has opened an investigation into financial elder abuse and credit card fraud. That is not in my hands anymore. Mom. His voice cracked. Mom, please, please. I could lose my job, my security clearance. Lauren and I just refinanced the house. We can't, Mom, please. I looked at him for a long time. My boy. My only boy, James, I said. Do you know what your father told me the week he was dying? He took my hand and he said, Linda, promise me one thing. Don't let our boy turn into a man who doesn't take care of his mother. I promised him. And then for 4 years, I let it happen anyway. Because I loved you. Because I wanted to believe you'd grow up. Well, you're 36 years old. You're grown. And you took $87,000 from your widowed mother. So we are going to do this the right way, the legal way. Because if I don't, I will spend the rest of my life knowing I broke a promise to a dying man. He started to cry, real, hard, ugly crying. I'm not made of stone. It hurt me to watch, but I did not move from where I was standing. Get out of my house, James, I said. Don't come back without your wife and a checkbook. He left. The door closed quietly behind him this time. I sat down at the kitchen table and I let myself shake. The next 90 days were the hardest of my life, and I include the months of Walter's illness in that. James called constantly at first, alternating between sobbing apologies and cold accusations. Lauren went on the offensive. She called my friends. She called my pastor. She called my older sister in Vermont. Anyone who would listen, she told them I had developed dementia, that I was being manipulated by my attorney, that she was terrified for my safety. She tried to file a petition for guardianship. I'm not making this up. She actually retained a lawyer in Boston and filed paperwork with the probate court alleging that I was incompetent to manage my own affairs. Diane Choi handled it. The judge took one look at the medical evaluation Diane had me complete with my own physician, took one look at the spreadsheet of unauthorized charges, and threw the petition out. He also, I learned later, made a few choice remarks about Lauren's attorney that apparently caused that attorney to drop her as a client. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation moved forward. The detective assigned to my case, a woman named Sergeant Riley, was patient and meticulous. She interviewed me 3 separate times. She subpoenaed records from James's bank, from Lauren's bank, from their joint accounts. She built a case that, she told me later, was one of the cleanest financial elder abuse files she'd ever seen. On day 86 of the 90-day demand period, James and Lauren's attorney delivered a cashier's check to Diane's office. $87,341.16, plus interest, plus attorney's fees, plus a written agreement that they would never again contact me directly without going through Diane. The criminal case proceeded separately. James pleaded down to a misdemeanor, paid restitution he'd already paid, and got 2 years of probation. Lauren refused to plea. Her case went to trial 9 months later. She was convicted on 2 felony counts. She received a suspended sentence and 3 years of probation. She also, I learned, lost her marketing job at the biotech company because the felony showed up on her background check after the conviction was reported in the local paper. James filed for divorce 4 months after Lauren's sentencing. I have not asked, and I do not want to know, what their marriage looked like in those months between the conviction and the filing. Here is what I want you to understand. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt, mostly, tired and hollow and deeply, deeply sad. I had won, and in winning, I had lost the only child I would ever have. For the first 6 months after Lauren's trial, I barely left the house. Helen would come over with casseroles and we would sit and not talk, which is the gift only the oldest friends can give you. My sister called every Sunday. My pastor visited once a week. And then one Saturday in April, I made myself get dressed properly, drove to Mount Auburn Hospital, where I had worked for 38 years, and I asked to speak to the volunteer coordinator. I told her I wanted to come back, not as a nurse, but as a hand to hold for patients who didn't have anyone. They started me the following Tuesday. That was 18 months ago. Last spring, I sold the house in Concord. Too many memories, too many empty rooms. I bought a small condo in Cambridge, walking distance to the hospital and to the Charles River. I joined a book club. I learned to take the T into the city by myself, which Walter had always done for us when he was alive. And 6 months ago, in line at the public library, I dropped a stack of books and a man my age bent down to help me pick them up. His name is Frank. He's a widower, 67, retired professor of American history at Tufts. He has 2 daughters, both in Oregon, both kind to him, neither of whom have ever asked him for $1. We have been seeing each other for about 4 months now. Last week he asked me if I would consider, when the time felt right, getting married. I told him I needed to think about it. I also told him I needed to introduce him to my attorney first, and we both laughed, but I wasn't entirely joking. Diane Choi has already drawn up a beautiful prenuptial agreement that protects both of our estates, and Frank read it without flinching and said, "Linda, this is exactly what 2 grown adults should do." James and I have not spoken in almost 2 years. He sent a card on my birthday this past August. I read it twice and put it in a drawer. I have not decided yet what to do with it. What I have decided is that I am 65 years old and I have a great deal of life left to live. I have my work at the hospital, where last week a woman dying of cancer squeezed my hand and told me I had her mother's eyes. I have my book club and my condo and my morning walks along the river. I have Helen and my sister and Frank. And I have, I will say it plainly, more peace than I have known since the morning Walter was diagnosed. If you are watching this and you are a mother or a father or a grandparent, and there is even a small voice in the back of your head saying, "Something isn't right with how my children are handling my money," I want you to listen to that voice. I want you to act on it. You worked your whole life for what you have. Loving your children does not mean letting them take it. Loving them sometimes means refusing to let them become the kind of people who would. See you in the next story. I have thought a great deal in the years since all of this happened about how a person ends up where Lauren and James ended up, and how I ended up where I did. I do not believe in luck. Not really. I believe that the small choices we make every day, the ones nobody else sees, are the seeds of the harvest we eventually have to gather. Walter used to say that. He was a quiet man, but he had a way of putting things that stuck. The truth is, I helped grow what happened to me. The first time James asked for $450 and forgot to pay back $100 of it, and I said nothing. I planted a seed. The second time Lauren asked for help and shorted me $500, and I let it slide because I wanted to keep the peace. I planted another. By the time the harvest came in, $87,000 deep, I could not pretend I had not been the one watering the garden. That is not me blaming myself for what they did. They did what they did, and they are accountable for it. But I had a part too, and pretending I didn't would be a kind of dishonesty I cannot afford anymore at my age. What I learned, and what I would want any woman my age to hear, is that kindness without a backbone is not really kindness. It is fear dressed up in nicer clothes. Real love, the kind that helps a child grow into a decent adult, sometimes has to look like a closed wallet and a clear word. I did not give James that when he was 30. I am trying to give it to him now, even from across the silence between us, by holding the line and not begging him to come back on terms that would make me a smaller person. There is a quiet strength in being older. People miss it because we are not loud about it. But I will tell you, the day I sat in Diane's office and signed the papers, I felt more like myself than I had in years. I had spent so long trying to be a good mother that I had forgotten how to be a good woman. And a good woman, in my book, is one who knows her own worth and does not apologize for protecting it. I do not know if James will ever come back to me as the son I raised. I hope so. But hoping is not the same as waiting, and I am done waiting for other people to give me my life back. I took it back myself, with Diane's help and Helen's, and eventually Frank's, and most of all with my own 2 hands, the same hands that pushed medication carts down hospital hallways for 38 years. If there is one thing I want you to take from my story, it is this. You are not too old, and it is not too late, and you do not owe anyone your peace.